They say an alpha without his wolf is already dead. But King Cassius Nightvane had spent 3,650 days proving them wrong, ruling with an iron fist while the beast inside him slept in chains he couldn't break. 10 years since the curse. 10 years since he'd felt fur replace skin, since claws had extended from his fingertips, since the moon had called to something wild in his blood. The healers whispered poison. The priests claimed divine punishment. His enemies smelled weakness like blood in water. Every full moon, Cassius stood alone in the highest tower of Thornhaven Castle, feeling the pull in his bones, the desperate howl trapped in his chest with nowhere to go. His wolf clawed at invisible barriers, raging against the prison that had no bars, no locks, no visible chains. Just absence. Just silence where there should have been savage communion with the moon. He was 23 when it happened. The night his father, the former Alpha King, died during a hunting expedition under suspicious circumstances. Cassius had shifted to track the killers, and mid-transformation, everything stopped. His body locked between forms, agony tearing through every nerve, until he collapsed back into human shape, gasping and broken. Since then, nothing. No matter how he tried, how he raged, how he bled, the wolf remained dormant. At 33, he ruled through strategy and ruthlessness instead of the primal dominance that should have been his birthright. His council feared him, his enemies plotted against him, and every alpha in the surrounding territories wondered when the broken king would finally fall. He compensated with brutal efficiency, learning to command through words instead of the alpha tone that required his wolf's presence. He mastered combat in human form, studied politics and war with obsessive precision, and built a reputation so fearsome that none dared challenge him directly. But in private moments, he was hollow. The mate bond he should feel, dormant. The pack connection that should pulse through his veins, silent. He was a king without a pack, an alpha without a beast, a wolf in name only. His younger brother, Darius, handled the pack bonds, translating Cassius's commands through his own wolf since the pack couldn't feel their true alpha anymore. A humiliation Cassius endured because he had no choice. The castle healers rotated through his chambers monthly, trying new herbs, new rituals, new theories. Nothing worked. The court mages examined him with their sensing stones that glowed for every supernatural being except him. When they pressed the stones to his chest, they flickered weakly, as if his wolf existed but was trapped behind glass, visible but unreachable. Last week, a new theory emerged. Royal advisor Matthias brought ancient texts suggesting the curse might be tied to an incomplete bond, a severed connection, or a magical binding that required a specific key. But what key? What connection? Cassius had investigated. Everyone present the night his father died. He'd executed 3 conspirators, exiled a dozen suspects, and still found no answers. Now, as he stood in his private study, overlooking Thornhaven's sprawling capital, he made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow, he would do what he'd avoided for 10 years. Attend the harvest festival among his people, not as the distant king in his fortress, but walking through the crowds. If there was a key, if there was an answer, hiding in his castle wouldn't find it. The harvest festival transformed Thornhaven's main square into controlled chaos. Merchants hawked autumn produce, children chased each other between stalls, and the scent of roasted meat and spiced cider filled the air. Cassius moved through it all with a contingent of guards, his presence parting crowds like a stone through water. People bowed, averting their eyes, maintaining respectful distance. He felt like a ghost haunting his own kingdom. Then he saw her. Or rather, he felt her before he saw her. A pulse of something warm in his chest, like a spark trying to catch flame in wet kindling. His wolf, dormant for a decade, stirred, not waking, but shifting in its sleep, responding to something for the first time in 3,650 days. Cassius stopped mid-step, his hand pressing against his sternum where the sensation bloomed. His guards immediately went on alert, scanning for threats. "Sire?" Captain Rowan moved closer. "What is it?" "I don't know," Cassius murmured, his eyes searching the crowd. The feeling pulled him left, toward the eastern stalls where artisans sold their crafts. He followed it like a rope around his ribs, his guards falling into protective formation around him. The sensation grew stronger with each step, his dormant wolf pressing against its cage with something that felt almost like hope. She stood at a pottery stall, her back to him, examining a clay vase with the focused attention of someone who actually cared about the clay vase. Craftsmanship. Autumn red hair cascaded down her back in waves that caught the sunlight. She wore simple traveling clothes, brown leather and forest green fabric, with mud on her boots that suggested she'd come from outside the city. Nothing about her screamed importance or power. She looked utterly ordinary, except she wasn't. The moment Cassius came within 10 feet of her, his wolf slammed against its prison so hard he gasped. The woman spun around at the sound, and their eyes met. Hers were the color of summer storms, gray-green and crackling with something electric. For 3 heartbeats, neither moved. The sounds of the festival faded to white noise. The crowd disappeared. She looked at him not with the fear or reverence he always received, but with recognition, as if she'd been expecting him, as if she knew exactly who and what he was, and wasn't impressed. "You," she said simply, her voice carrying a strange accent he couldn't place. Finally, before Cassius could respond, before his guards could intervene, she closed the distance between them in 2 strides and pressed her palm flat against his chest, directly over his heart. The contact sent lightning through his entire body. His wolf didn't just stir, it roared. 10 years of silence shattered in an instant as the beast inside him surged toward her touch like a drowning man toward air. Cassius's eyes blazed gold, his canines lengthening, claws beginning to extend before he forcibly controlled the partial shift. His guards drew weapons, but Captain Rowan held up a hand, stopping them. Everyone had seen it. The Broken King had just shown wolf traits for the first time in a decade. The woman stepped back, her hand falling away, and immediately the sensation muted. His wolf snarled in protest, demanding he close the distance again. "Who are you?" Cassius demanded, his voice rough with the effort of containing the shift. "My name is Celine Ashford," she said calmly, as if she hadn't just performed an impossible miracle with a single touch. "And you and I need to have a very private conversation, Your Majesty. Preferably before your brother's assassins try to kill me in the next 3 hours." Cassius had Celine brought to his private study under heavy guard, ignoring the shocked whispers that followed their procession through the castle. His wolf had settled back into dormancy the moment her hand left his chest, but the memory of that surge remained, proof that whatever afflicted him could be touched, could be affected, could possibly be broken. In his study, he dismissed everyone except Captain Rowan, who took position by the door, and turned to face the strange woman who'd upended his world with a single touch. "Explain," he commanded, putting every ounce of authority into his voice despite lacking the alpha tone. "How did you do that? What are you?" Celine stood by the window, seemingly unconcerned by the armed guard at the door or the king's barely contained intensity. She examined his study with the same focused attention she'd given the pottery, taking in the strategic maps, the ancient texts, the weapons mounted on walls. "I'm what's called a conduit," she said finally. "Rare. Usually killed young because most supernatural beings don't understand what we are. We don't have power ourselves, we channel it, amplify it, connect what's been severed." "My wolf isn't severed," Cassius said sharply. "The healers confirmed it's still there, just dormant." "Dormant isn't the right word." Celine turned to face him. "Bound is more accurate. Someone placed a binding on your wolf specifically, a magical lock that requires a key." "I'm not the key, Your Majesty. I'm the locksmith. My touch lets me see the mechanism of what's been done to you." She paused, her storm-colored eyes meeting his. "And what I saw in those 3 seconds was ugly. Whoever did this wanted you alive but powerless. They wanted you to suffer for a very long time." Cassius's jaw tightened. "You said my brother's assassins would come for you. Explain that accusation." "It's not an accusation, it's a warning." Celine moved away from the window, closer to him. "Your brother Darius didn't curse you directly. He was 16 when it happened, barely old enough to understand what he was agreeing to. But he made a deal with a witch named Morvanna the Veilweaver. She killed your father, and bound your wolf in exchange for a promise that when Darius eventually took the throne, he would grant her sanctuary and resources. Except you didn't die, or step down like they expected. You survived, adapted, ruled. And now Morvanna is getting impatient. She wants her payment, which means Darius needs you gone. The accusation hung in the air like poison. Captain Rowan shifted uncomfortably by the door. Cassius felt ice spreading through his veins because the pieces fit too perfectly. Darius's convenient arrival at the hunting lodge just after their father's death, his brother's insistence on handling pack bonds. The way Darius had pushed for Cassius to take a mate, to name an heir, to prepare for succession. Why should I believe you? Cassius asked quietly, dangerously. Because in about 2 hours, someone will attempt to poison the evening meal with wolfsbane concentrate, Celine said calmly. It won't kill you, you're too strong for that, but it will make you violently ill. While you're incapacitated, Darius will call an emergency council meeting to discuss your fitness to rule. He'll suggest stepping down for your health. Some will support him. And in the chaos, I'll be killed, made to look like a suicide or accident, ensuring you never get another chance at breaking the curse. Cassius stared at her, reading her body language, searching for deception. She stood perfectly still, meeting his gaze without flinching, her heartbeat steady and strong enough that his human ears could detect its rhythm. She believed what she was saying. Rowan, he said without looking, away from Celine. Send word to the kitchens. No food or drink is to be prepared for my chambers without Master Chef Halden personally supervising and tasting everything first. And have Darius summoned to the throne room in 1 hour. Tell him it's urgent regarding the eastern border disputes. Your Majesty, Rowan hesitated. If the prince is truly, then we'll know soon enough. Cassius finally broke eye contact with Celine, moving to his desk where he pulled out parchment. I'm going to write 3 sealed orders. If I'm poisoned tonight as she predicts, you'll open the red seal. If I'm not, you'll open the blue seal. The third is for if I'm found dead, under any circumstances. He worked in silence, aware of Celine watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. When he finished, he sealed each order with his personal signet and handed them to Rowan. Keep these on your person. Tell no one what I've told you. Dismissed. After the captain left, Cassius turned back to Celine. You said you're not the key to breaking the curse, just the locksmith. Can you break it, or can you only let me feel what I've lost? I can break it, Celine said. But it requires time, repeated contact, and most importantly, trust. The binding feeds on your isolation, your disconnection from pack bonds. Every time I touch you, I weaken the lock a little. But if Morvanna senses what I'm doing, she'll either strengthen the curse or kill me before I can finish. That's why I said you and I need to have a very private conversation. She moved closer, close enough that he could smell pine and earth on her skin. You need to decide right now, King Cassius. Do you trust me enough to let me try? Because once we start, there's no going back. Morvanna will know you have a chance at freedom, and she'll come for both of us. Cassius looked at this stranger who'd walked into his life and offered him hope for the first time in 10 years. Every instinct warned him it could be a trap. But his wolf, silent for so long, had responded to her. And if she was telling the truth about the poison, about Darius, about everything, then doing nothing meant dying slowly while his brother waited for his throne. He made his decision. Break the curse, he said. Whatever it takes. Celine smiled, and it transformed her face from merely pretty to something luminous. Then we should probably start before dinner, because you're going to need your wolf when this all goes to hell. Celine's prediction proved accurate with horrifying precision. That evening, Master Chef Halden discovered concentrated wolfsbane mixed into the wine specifically designated for the king's chambers. The dosage would have caused severe illness, possibly death, if Cassius had consumed the entire bottle. The sommelier who'd prepared it was found dead in the wine cellar an hour later. Apparent suicide by the same poison, though the timing was suspiciously convenient. Cassius ordered the castle locked down, no one in or out. He stationed guards at every entrance and sent his most trusted scouts to track any suspicious departures. Then he summoned his brother to the throne room, where Darius arrived looking appropriately concerned and confused. Brother, what's happening? The guards won't tell me anything, except there was an attempt on your life. Not an attempt, Cassius said from his throne, studying Darius carefully. A failed plot. Someone wanted me incapacitated, not dead. I wonder why. Darius's expression remained perfectly composed. Thank the gods you discovered it in time. We should increase security, have the council meet to discuss. The council will meet tomorrow, Cassius interrupted. Tonight, I need you to handle the pack bonds. There's unrest in the Western Territories I need you to soothe. It was a test. Pack bonds required the Alpha's authority channeled through Darius's wolf. If his brother was plotting against him, refusing would reveal guilt. Accepting meant putting himself in a vulnerable position where Cassius could observe him closely. Darius hesitated for a fraction of a second. Of course, whatever you need. As his brother left, Captain Rowan emerged from the shadows. He's afraid. I could smell it beneath the concern. Fear doesn't prove guilt, Cassius said, though his gut told him otherwise. Where is Celine? In the Eastern Tower, where you ordered. She's been asking about your family history, specifically your mother's lineage. That made Cassius pause. His mother had died giving birth to Darius. He barely remembered her, except through paintings, and his father's grief. Why would that matter? She says the curse is tied to your bloodline specifically, not just to you. Something about sympathetic magic requiring a connection to its target. If Morvanna used something of your mother's in the binding, it might explain why standard breaking methods haven't worked. Rowan shifted uncomfortably. Sire, there's something else. 3 servants reported seeing a woman in gray robes walking the corridors near the wine cellar around the time the sommelier died. She vanished before anyone could question her. A witch in the castle. Cassius rose from his throne. Mobilize the guard. I want every room searched, every passage checked. If Morvanna is here... The castle bells began ringing in the pattern reserved for emergencies. Then screaming erupted from the lower levels. Cassius ran, Rowan beside him, toward the source of the commotion. They arrived at the entrance to the castle's wine cellar to find guards backing away from the doorway, weapons drawn but clearly terrified. Inside, the dead sommelier's body had risen, animated by dark magic, its dead eyes glowing sickly green. But worse than that, symbols had been carved into every surface, glowing with the same nauseating light, and in the center of it all stood a woman in gray robes. Morvanna the Veilweaver was younger than Cassius expected, perhaps 40, with silver-streaked black hair and eyes that held too many years. She smiled when she saw him. King Cassius, finally, we meet properly. I was starting to think you'd never leave your tower. You're under arrest for murder, conspiracy, and dark magic, Cassius stated, gesturing for his guards to advance. Surrender or be killed. With what? Morvanna laughed. Your wolf? Oh, wait. You don't have access to that anymore, do you? I made sure of it. She raised her hands, and the symbols on the walls flared brighter. The animated corpse lurched toward the guards, who met it with swords that did nothing to slow it down. I gave you 10 years, to die quietly. To step aside, to admit defeat. But you're stubborn, just like your father was, and now you've brought in a conduit, thinking she can save you. She already has, Cassius said, and felt Celine's presence behind him before he heard her footsteps. The red-haired woman walked past him calmly, her eyes fixed on Morvanna with an expression of professional assessment. Hello, Veilweaver. You're sloppier than I expected. Using an animated corpse as a distraction while you trace the sympathetic connection back to its source? Predictable. Morvanna's smile vanished. You can't interfere with my work, Conduit. The binding has held for 10 years. It's integrated into his very essence now. Breaking it would kill him. Only if done incorrectly, Celine replied. She glanced at Cassius. This is going to hurt. A lot. She's trying to reinforce the curse while we stand here talking. I need to sever her connection to you completely, right now, or you'll never have another chance. Do you trust me? Cassius looked at the witch who'd stolen 10 years of his life, at the corpse attacking his guards, at the castle he'd fought so hard to protect and rule despite everything. Then he looked at Celine, this stranger who'd walked into his life less than 6 hours ago, and made a choice that defied logic. Do it. Celine pressed both hands against his chest, and the world exploded into agony. Pain unlike anything Cassius had ever experienced tore through him. It felt like someone had reached inside his chest and set his soul on fire. He heard himself screaming but couldn't stop, couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the searing agony that radiated from where Celine's hands pressed against him. His wolf, trapped for so long, thrashed violently as if being pulled apart. Morvana shrieked in rage. The symbols on the walls flared so bright they burned after images into everyone's vision. "You're killing him, you fool. The binding is part of him now. You can't just rip it out." "I'm not ripping it out," Celine said through gritted teeth, sweat beading on her forehead from the effort. "I'm redirecting it. Every curse needs an anchor. You used his mother's wedding ring, didn't you? Melted it down and mixed it with his father's blood on the night you killed him. Sympathetic magic bound to family, bloodlines." Her hands glowed with silver light that seeped into Cassius's chest. "But bloodlines run both ways. If I can reverse the connection, the curse rebounds on you." Understanding dawned in Morvana's eyes, followed by pure terror. "No. No." She began chanting in a guttural language, trying to sever her own connection to the spell, but Celine was faster. The silver light expanded, becoming a visible thread that ran from Cassius through Celine directly to Morvana. The witch tried to run, but the thread pulled taut, and suddenly she was the one screaming. Cassius felt the moment the binding broke. It was like chains he'd forgotten existed, suddenly snapping, like weights he'd grown used to carrying vanishing, like breathing after being underwater for an eternity. His wolf surged forward with 10 years of rage and hunger, and this time, there was nothing stopping it. The shift took him in seconds. Bones broke and reformed, muscles tearing and healing instantly, his human body reshaping into something powerful and primal. When the transformation completed, a massive black wolf stood where the king had been, easily twice the size of any normal alpha, with eyes that burned gold like captured sunlight. The animated corpse collapsed into truly dead flesh. Morvana fell to her knees, the curse rebounding on her, binding her own magic in ways that made her scream. And through it all, Celine stood steady, her hands still glowing silver, maintaining the connection that had saved Cassius's life. Captain Rowan and the guards stared in shocked silence. Their king, unable to shift for a decade, now stood before them in full wolf form, radiating power that made the air itself feel heavy. Cassius's wolf wanted blood, wanted vengeance, wanted to tear apart the witch who'd stolen so much from him. But Celine's voice cut through the rage. "Not yet. She's connected to your brother. If you kill her now, the backlash will kill Darius too, and you need him alive to answer for what he's done." The wolf snarled, every instinct demanding immediate violence, but Cassius forced control. He shifted back to human form, the transition smooth after so long, and found himself kneeling on the stone floor, gasping. Rowan immediately draped a cloak over him. Cassius stood, turned to Morvana, who writhed on the ground, and spoke with a voice that carried his alpha tone for the first time in 10 years. "Where's my brother?" The command wasn't a request. It was compulsion backed by primal authority that no wolf could resist. Morvana choked out the words. "The old hunting lodge, where your father died. He's been waiting there, preparing his claim to the throne for when you finally fell." "Take her to the dungeons," Cassius ordered his guards. "Silver chains, and send a contingent to the hunting lodge. Bring Prince Darius back alive. He will answer for his crimes before the entire court." As guards dragged the witch away, Cassius turned to Celine, who swayed on. Her feet, clearly exhausted from whatever she'd done. "You saved my life, twice now in less than a day." "I told you I could break the curse," she said with a tired smile. "Though I'll admit, I wasn't entirely sure it would work. Reversing sympathetic magic is more theory than practice in most conduit training." "Most conduit training?" Cassius stepped closer, catching her elbow when she stumbled. "How many of you are there? Alive? Maybe a dozen in the entire continent. Most of us are killed young because we're seen as threats or tools. I've spent my life staying hidden, never staying anywhere long enough to be noticed. until I heard about the cursed Alpha King and realized I might actually be able to help someone for once. She looked up at him, her storm-colored eyes serious. Your brother is just one part of this, Cassius. Morvanna worked for someone else. Someone who wanted your entire bloodline destabilized. Breaking the curse doesn't mean you're safe. Before he could respond, a guard rushed up. Your Majesty, there's been a development. The contingent you sent to the hunting lodge found Prince Darius, but he's not alone. There are at least 40 wolves with him, alphas from the rival territories. They're marching on the castle. He's calling it a mercy intervention, claiming you've been compromised by dark magic and must be removed for the kingdom's safety. Cassius's jaw tightened. His brother had prepared for this moment, building alliances while Cassius struggled to maintain control without his wolf. How long until they arrive? By dawn, sire. Dawn. 6 hours to prepare for what would essentially be civil war. Cassius looked around at his assembled guards, at Captain Rowan, whose loyalty he'd never doubted, and at Celine, who'd risked everything to free him. Then we have work to do. If Darius wants my throne, he'll have to take it from a fully powered Alpha King. And I've had 10 years to plan how I'll break anyone who tries. Cassius spent the hours before dawn transforming Thornhaven Castle into a fortress. Guards reinforced every entrance, archers positioned themselves on the walls, and the few pack members still loyal to him despite the decade of broken bonds gathered in the main courtyard. He stood before them as the sky began to lighten, no longer the diminished king they'd served out of duty, but a fully manifested alpha whose power rolled off him in waves. My brother comes with foreign wolves to take what isn't his, Cassius announced, his alpha tone carrying to every corner of the courtyard. He thinks I'm weak, that 10 years without my wolf have made me vulnerable. He's about to learn he's wrong. The pack, feeling their true alpha's power for the first time in a decade, responded with howls that echoed off the mountains. The bond snapped into place like it had never been severed, connecting Cassius to each of them, letting him feel their loyalty, their relief, their hunger for proper leadership. It was intoxicating after so long disconnected, and he had to control the urge to simply revel in it. Celine approached, dressed now in armor someone had found for her. Your brother will try to challenge you directly. Alpha combat. If he wins, his claim to the throne is legitimate in the eyes of traditional law. I know. Cassius watched the horizon where torches marked Darius's approaching force. But he's never fought me at full strength. He was 16 when this started. He doesn't actually know what I'm capable of. That's not what worries me. Celine moved closer, lowering her voice. Morvanna is contained, but someone hired her. Someone wanted your bloodline destabilized badly enough to plan this for years. Killing Darius might be exactly what they want. Eliminating both of you, leaving the throne open for someone else entirely. The thought had occurred to Cassius as well. Then I won't kill him. I'll break him, humiliate him, and make him confess everything in front of witnesses. No one will question my right to rule after that. And if he won't confess, then I'll make him wish I'd chosen to kill him instead. The approaching force reached the castle gates as the sun crested the mountains. Darius rode at their head, flanked by Alpha Cormac of the Eastern Territories and Alpha Thalia of the Southern Reaches, both powerful leaders who'd been thorns in Cassius's side for years. Behind them marched 40 wolves in human form, all wearing the colors of their respective packs. It was an intimidating display meant to make surrender seem inevitable. Cassius met them outside the gates, alone except for Celine and Captain Rowan. The power differential was obvious and intentional. He wanted his brother to see him unafraid, despite being outnumbered. "Brother," Darius called out, his voice carrying false concern. "Thank the gods you're alive. We heard reports of dark magic in the castle, of you being compromised by a witch. These alphas have graciously agreed to help me ensure your safety and the kingdom's security." "How noble," Cassius replied dryly. "Except Morvanna the Veilweaver is currently in my dungeons, where she confessed to cursing me 10 years ago. At your request, in exchange for the throne once I was eliminated." Darius's expression didn't change, but several of the wolves behind him shifted uncomfortably. Alpha Cormac frowned. "Prince Darius told us you were incapacitated, unable to shift, compromised by dark forces. I was unable to shift, Cassius said, and felt his wolf rise to just beneath his skin, making his eyes flash gold. Because my brother hired a witch to bind my wolf the night she murdered our father. But curses can be broken. And now I want to know which of you knew about his betrayal, and which of you were simply useful fools. The accusation hung in the air like an executioner's blade. Darius laughed, but it sounded forced. This is madness. Brother, the curse has clearly affected your mind. You're paranoid, seeing conspiracies where... Challenge me. Cassius's alpha tone cut through the protest like a knife. If you think I'm unfit to rule, if you believe your claim is stronger, challenge me right here, right now. Or admit you're a coward and a traitor and face execution. The traditional challenge. Every wolf present understood its weight. If Darius refused, he admitted weakness. If he accepted, he faced an alpha at full power after years of never experiencing Cassius's true strength. Cassius watched his brother calculate options, saw the moment Darius realized he was trapped. Very well, Darius said, dismounting. I accept your challenge. When I win, these alphas will witness that I took the throne honorably, and this kingdom will finally have proper leadership. They stripped to their skin in the growing daylight, standing 50 feet apart while the assembled wolves formed a circle. No weapons, no armor, no help. Just two alphas, and the throne that only one would walk away from. Captain Rowan leaned close to Celine. The prince is younger, faster. He's been training while the king couldn't shift. Watch, Celine murmured. The shift took them both simultaneously. Darius transformed into a lean gray wolf, built for speed and agility. Cassius became the massive black wolf that had emerged the night before, easily twice his brother's size, with jaws that could crush stone and claws that scored the earth. The size difference was shocking. Darius hesitated, clearly not expecting such a disparity. Cassius didn't give him time to adjust. He attacked with 10 years of rage, moving faster than something his size should be able to move. Darius dodged the first strike, using his smaller size to slip aside, but Cassius anticipated it. His massive paw caught Darius across the ribs, sending the smaller wolf tumbling. Darius recovered quickly, circling, looking for an opening. He darted in, aiming for Cassius's throat, but the larger wolf twisted impossibly fast, catching Darius by the scruff and slamming him into the ground hard enough to crack stone. The fight was brutal and one-sided. Every time Darius tried to use speed, Cassius matched him. Every time Darius tried to use strategy, Cassius was 2 steps ahead. Within minutes, Darius was bleeding from a dozen wounds, limping, his breathing labored. Cassius had barely been scratched. The assembled wolves watched in silence, seeing their presumptions about the broken king shatter with each devastating blow. Finally, Cassius pinned Darius completely, jaws around his throat, applying just enough pressure to threaten without killing. The message was clear: yield or die. Darius shifted back to human form in surrender, gasping, I yield, you win. Cassius shifted as well, still pinning his brother to the ground. Confess. Tell them everything. Who hired Morvana? Why kill our father? Who else is involved? Go to hell. Darius spat blood. Cassius's claws extended, pressing into his brother's throat. Confess, or I'll make this last hours. The pressure increased. Darius choked, terror finally breaking through his defiance. It was Lord Regent Malveau. He orchestrated everything, said the kingdom needed new blood, that our father was weak for maintaining peace instead of conquering. He promised me the throne, promised I'd have his support and his resources if I helped remove you both. Morvana was his witch, his tool. I was supposed to rule until my son came of age, then step aside for Malvau's bloodline to take over through marriage to my heir. The confession rippled through the assembled wolves like a shockwave. Lord Regent Malveau was the king's chief counselor, a position of immense trust. If he'd been plotting for over a decade, how deep did his corruption run? Cassius released Darius and stood, shifting his attention to the foreign alphas. You heard him. My brother is a traitor and a kinslayer. Anyone who stands with him stands against me. Choose. Now. Alpha Cormac and Alpha Thalia exchanged glances, then both took a knee. We were deceived, King Cassius. We came believing we were helping prevent a magical catastrophe. Now we see we were tools in a larger conspiracy. You have our apology and our support. One by one, the other wolves followed suit until only Darius remained standing, bloodied and broken. Cassius turned to Captain Rowan. Take my brother to the dungeons. Silver chains next to Morvanna. They can contemplate their failures together. As guards moved to secure Darius, Selene approached Cassius. Lord Regent Malveau, do you know where he is? In the castle, probably in the council chambers, thinking he's safe. Cassius's eyes burned gold. He's about to learn otherwise. Lord Regent Malveau was not in the council chambers. According to terrified servants, he'd fled through the secret passages the moment word reached him that Cassius had won the challenge and Darius had confessed. The passages led to the old forest beyond the castle walls, a network of escape routes built generations ago. Cassius stood in the revealed passage entrance, his wolf prowling just beneath his skin, furious that the architect of his suffering was escaping. He's had a 30-minute head start, Captain Rowan reported. The passages exit 3 miles into the Thornwood. He could be anywhere by now. Not anywhere. Selene examined the passage walls, running her fingers over the stone. He's a planner. Someone who orchestrates decade-long conspiracies doesn't run without a destination. Where would he go that would give him leverage or protection? Cassius thought hard, reviewing everything he knew about Malveau. The man had served his father faithfully, or so it seemed, for 20 years before the betrayal. He had estates throughout the kingdom, connections to noble houses, resources hidden in the Valewood Sanctuary, Cassius said suddenly. It's an old temple complex in the deep forest, officially abandoned for centuries. But Malveau used to visit there for historical research. If he has allies, resources, or another witch on retainer, that's where they'd be. How far? Selene asked. 6 hours on horseback, 3 if I run as a wolf. Cassius turned to Rowan. Secure the castle. Trust no one on the council until they can be properly vetted. Take statements from everyone who had regular contact with Malveau. I want to know the full extent of his network. You're going after him yourself? Rowan looked concerned. Sire, if it's a trap, then I'll destroy the trap. Cassius felt his wolf's hunger for vengeance. He took 10 years of my life. He murdered my father. He tried to steal my throne. This ends today. I'm coming with you, Selene said, not a request but a statement. It's too dangerous. If he has another witch, then you'll need a conduit. She met his eyes steadily. I didn't break your curse just to watch you walk into another one. Besides, I'm not defenseless. She pulled back her sleeve to reveal intricate silver tattoos running up her arm, symbols Cassius didn't recognize. Conduits learn to protect themselves. We have to. He wanted to argue, to insist she stay safe in the castle, but the determined set of her jaw told him it would be pointless, and truthfully, having her presence nearby had become necessary, comforting in ways he didn't fully understand yet. Fine, but you follow my lead and don't take unnecessary risks. They left through the passage, Cassius in wolf form to move faster, Selene somehow keeping pace with a stamina that suggested she was more than simply human. The thornwood grew denser as they went deeper, ancient trees blocking out sunlight, creating a perpetual twilight. Cassius's wolf senses caught Malveau's scent trail easily, following it with single-minded focus. 3 hours in, the trail led them to the Valewood Sanctuary. The temple complex rose from the forest floor like broken teeth, ancient, stone structures overrun with vines and moss. But it wasn't abandoned. Fresh torches burned in sconces, and Cassius could smell multiple wolves, maybe a dozen, stationed throughout the ruins. Malveau had indeed prepared a bolt hole. Cassius shifted to human form, crouching beside Selene behind a fallen pillar. He's got guards, probably mercenaries, wolves with no loyalty to Thornhaven. More than that, Selene pointed to symbols carved into the temple stones, glowing faintly with sickly green light. Wards, same style as Morvanna's work. There's another witch here, probably maintaining the protections. Before Cassius could formulate a plan, Malvo's voice echoed from the central temple. I know you're there, Cassius. I felt you the moment you entered my sanctuary. Why don't you come in? We have much to discuss. It was obviously a trap. Cassius knew it. Celine knew it. And Malvo knew they knew. But the alternative was trying to assault a fortified position with unknown, magical defenses. Cover me, Cassius murmured to Celine. If this goes wrong, run back to the castle and tell Rowan to burn this place to the ground. I'm not leaving you, she said firmly. Celine. I said I'm not leaving. Her storm-colored eyes blazed with determination. We do this together or not at all. Something warm unfurled in Cassius's chest. A feeling he hadn't experienced in so long, he almost didn't recognize it. Trust. Partnership. Connection. He nodded once, then stood and walked into the temple with Celine beside him, knowing he was walking into a trap, but refusing to face it alone. The temple's interior was larger than it appeared from outside, a vast circular chamber with a cracked dome ceiling that let in shafts of filtered sunlight. Lord Regent Malvo stood at the center on a raised dais, looking surprisingly calm for a fugitive. He was a distinguished man in his 50s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, wearing traveling clothes but still maintaining his characteristic composure. Around him stood 10 wolves in human form, mercenaries by their mismatched attire and the calculated coldness in their eyes. Cassius, Malvo greeted with a slight bow. I must congratulate you on breaking the curse. I honestly didn't think it was possible after so many years. Morvanna assured me the binding would hold until you died of old age. You murdered my father, Cassius stated, his voice deadly calm. You cursed me. You manipulated my brother. Why? What could possibly be worth all this? Vision, Malvo said simply. Your father was weak, Cassius. He pursued peace when we should have been expanding. He made treaties with human kingdoms instead of conquering them. He allowed other supernatural races to maintain autonomy instead of establishing wolf dominance. Under his rule, we were stagnating. So you killed him and tried to destroy his heir. I tried to replace him with someone more malleable. Malvo glanced around the temple. Darius was supposed to be a puppet king. I would have guided him, shaped policy through him, built the empire your father refused to create. But you survived, adapted, became a problem I couldn't easily solve because killing you outright would have made you a martyr. And now? Cassius asked, aware of Celine beside him, her silver tattoos beginning to glow faintly. Now I have a choice. I can kill you here, where no witnesses will question the story I craft. Or, Malvo's expression shifted to something calculating. You can join me. You're powerful now, Cassius. Ruthless. You've proven you can rule without the weakness your father showed. Together, we could reshape this kingdom into something worthy of wolf supremacy. The offer hung in the air, absurd, and yet somehow sincere. Cassius stared at the man who'd stolen a decade of his life, who'd murdered his father, who'd manipulated his brother, and felt his wolf snarl with the need for violence. You think I would ever ally with you after what you've done? I think you're practical, Malvo replied. You've spent 10 years learning to rule without your wolf. You understand that idealism doesn't keep a kingdom strong. Your father's mercy made him vulnerable. Your suffering made you ruthless. Use it. Use me. I have resources, connections, plans that could make Thornhaven the dominant power on the continent. He's stalling, Celine said quietly. The wards are charging. There's a ritual in progress. Cassius felt it then. The building pressure of magic in the air. The symbols on the walls were glowing brighter, pulsing in rhythm with something beneath the temple. What have you done? Malvo smiled. Insurance. If you won't join me, I'll take your power by force. There's a binding circle beneath this temple, one that will trap your wolf and transfer its essence to me. I'll become what you are, and you'll return to what you were, powerless. The floor beneath them suddenly flared with light, as hidden symbols activated. Cassius tried to move, to escape the circle, but ethereal chains shot up from the stone, wrapping around his limbs, his neck, his chest. They burned like silver but bound like iron. Celine lunged to help him, but the mercenary wolves surrounded her, forcing her back. The ritual requires time, Malvo continued conversationally as Cassius struggled against the chains. About an hour to fully transfer the essence. It will be agony for you, naturally. But look at it this way. You'll finally understand what your father felt in his last moments. Helpless, betrayed, dying slowly while the world he built crumbled around him. Cassius's wolf raged against the chains, pulling with enough force to crack the stone beneath him, but the binding held. He watched Malvo begin chanting in the same guttural language Morvana had used, saw his form starting to shift as the stolen essence began flowing toward him. In minutes, the Lord Regent would have everything. Then, Celine did something unexpected. Her silver tattoos blazed brilliant white, and she spoke in a voice that echoed with harmonics that shouldn't exist in a single throat. You're not the only one who's been hiding, Malvo. The temperature in the temple dropped 20 degrees. The mercenary wolves backed away from her as her form shifted, not physically but dimensionally. She became more, as if multiple versions of her existed in the same space simultaneously. Conduits don't just channel power, she said, and now Cassius could see truth written in light around her. We are power. We're the spaces between magic and reality, the bridges between what is and what could be. Most conduits never learn this because they're killed too young. But I'm 247 years old, and I've had a lot of time to learn what I'm capable of. Malvo stopped chanting, genuine fear crossing his face. That's impossible. Conduits are human. They don't live. We're not human, Celine interrupted. We're something older. We were here before wolves learned to walk upright, before witches learned to bind magic, before the moon goddess created the first pack bonds. We are the original magic, and you just tried to trap one in a circle designed for wolves. She placed her hands on the nearest binding chain, and it shattered into light particles. Then the next. Then the next. Within seconds, Cassius was free, the ritual circle broken, its power dispersing harmlessly. The mercenary wolves fled, intelligent enough to recognize a threat beyond their pay grade. Malvo tried to run, but Cassius was faster. He shifted mid-leap, his massive black wolf form tackling the Lord Regent before he made it 3 steps. He pinned him to the ground, jaws around his throat, applying just enough pressure to threaten. Wait, Malvo gasped. I can still be useful. I have information, resources, connections to other conspirators. Kill me and you'll never know the full extent. I don't need you alive to find your co-conspirators, Cassius said, shifting back to human form while maintaining his hold. I have Darius. I have Morvana. I have your personal records in the castle. You're not valuable, you're just a traitor. He looked up at Celine, who stood surrounded by fading light, looking exhausted but satisfied. How much of that was true? About being 247 years old? All of it, she said softly. I should have told you sooner, but I've spent 2 centuries watching everyone I care about die of old age while I endure. It makes you cautious about forming attachments. 200 years, Cassius repeated, processing this. Why help me? Why reveal yourself? Because you were different. Celine moved closer, her tattoos fading back to their dormant silver. In 200 years, I've seen a lot of powerful beings. Most use their power to dominate, to take, to control, but you spent a decade powerless and still ruled with honor. You could have become bitter, cruel, vindictive. Instead, you became strategic, careful, protective of those you led. That's rare. That's worth saving. Under his wolf, with a traitor pinned beneath him, and this ancient being confessing centuries of loneliness, Cassius felt something shift in his understanding of the world. What are you, really? Exactly what I said. A conduit. A bridge. A space between things. Celine smiled sadly. And apparently, according to the way your wolf responds to me, your mate. Which is cosmically ironic since I'm functionally immortal and you'll live maybe a century. The universe has a cruel sense of humor. The mate bond. Cassius had felt it since she first touched him, that pull that went beyond logic or reason. His wolf had recognized her instantly, and now, knowing what she truly was, the bond made a different kind of sense. "We'll figure it out," he said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "Later, after I deal with this." He looked down at Malvo, who stared up with the desperate hope of someone clinging to life. Cassius thought about his father, murdered for pursuing peace, about 10 years stolen from him, about his brother corrupted, about all the damage this one man's ambition had caused. "Any last words?" "You're making a mistake," Malvo whispered. "Others will come. This conspiracy is bigger than me. Bigger than you know. Then I'll face them too." Cassius's jaws tightened, and Malvo's neck snapped with a sound like breaking branches. It was quick, cleaner than the traitor deserved, but Cassius was done drawing this out. Justice, not revenge. He shifted back to human form and stood, looking at Celine. "We should go back. I have a kingdom to stabilize, and apparently a conspiracy to unravel." "Together?" she asked, and he heard the vulnerability in the question. 200 years of watching connections end in death had clearly left scars. "Together," Cassius confirmed. "For however long we have." They returned to Thornhaven Castle as heroes. Word had spread of the king reclaiming his power, of the traitors exposed and justice served. The castle grounds filled with celebrating pack members, nobles offering renewed loyalty, and foreign alphas swearing support. Cassius accepted it all with the political grace he'd learned during his powerless decade, but he couldn't shake Malvo's final words. "Others will come. This conspiracy is bigger than you know." Captain Rowan met them at the castle entrance with troubling news. "Sire, we've been going through Lord Malvo's private chambers as you ordered. We found correspondence, coded messages sent through multiple intermediaries. We've barely begun deciphering them, but what we have translated so far suggests he was taking orders from someone else. He wasn't the architect of the conspiracy, he was middle management." Cassius's jaw tightened. "Show me." In Malvo's study, now swarming with the kingdom's best scholars and codebreakers, Cassius examined the evidence. Dozens of letters spanning decades, written in ciphers that required multiple keys to decode. The few they'd cracked revealed a chilling picture. Malvo had been recruited 30 years ago by someone referred to only as the Shepherd. This shepherd had orchestrated the slow destabilization of multiple wolf kingdoms across the continent, always working through intermediaries, never revealing themselves directly. "It's a purge," Celine said quietly, reading over Cassius's shoulder. "Not through direct war, but through systematic elimination of strong bloodlines. Your father was just one target. Look at these other names. Alpha Sebastian of Ironmoor died mysteriously 5 years ago. Queen Alara of Silverpine died in childbirth, despite being healthy. Prince Tomas of Ravencrest killed in a hunting accident, all within the past decade, all leaving their kingdoms weakened or in chaos. Why? Cassius demanded. What's the goal? Who benefits from destabilizing wolf kingdoms? Someone who wants wolves divided when they make their move, suggested Scholar Matthias, one of the code breakers. An external threat, perhaps, or an internal one from a race we've been ignoring. Before anyone could speculate further, the castle bells rang in alarm. Cassius rushed to the walls to find a single rider approaching under a white flag of parley. The rider was young, barely out of adolescence, riding a horse that looked half dead from exhaustion. Guards brought him to the courtyard where Cassius waited. The boy collapsed off his horse, gasping. "King Cassius," he choked out. "I come from Ironmoor. We're under attack. Not by wolves, by something else. They came 3 days ago, hundreds of them, wearing no colors, serving no banner. They're killing everyone, burning everything. But they're not conquering. They're just destroying. Alpha Marcus sent me to beg for aid, but I fear I may be too late. They were overrunning the capital when I left." Ironmoor was 3 days' hard ride to the north. If it had already fallen when this messenger left, the destruction was already complete. Cassius looked at Celine, who'd gone pale. "What aren't you telling me?" "Ironmoor was where Alpha Sebastian ruled," she said. "The one mentioned in Malvo's letters as being eliminated 5 years ago. His son, Marcus, has been struggling to maintain control since. If someone is targeting weakened kingdoms systematically, then Thornhaven is next, Cassius finished. We just exposed our internal weakness with Darius's betrayal and Malvo's conspiracy. Anyone watching would see us as vulnerable. As if summoned by his words, more riders arrived. Then more. Messengers from Silverpine, Ravencrest, Stonefang, all with the same story. Mysterious forces attacking wolf territories, targeting capitals, killing leadership, leaving destruction but taking nothing. 7 kingdoms under simultaneous assault. It's coordinated, Captain Rowan said grimly. This is an invasion, but unlike any we've seen before. Cassius climbed to the highest tower, looking out over his kingdom. In the distance, on the northern horizon, he could see smoke. Not from cookfires or forges, but from massive blazes. The attacks had reached Thornhaven's outer territories. How long until they reached the capital? 2 days, maybe less, Rowan estimated. 2 days to prepare for an enemy they didn't understand, fighting with methods they hadn't anticipated. Cassius turned to his assembled advisors, to the foreign alphas who'd come to challenge him and now might have to stand with him, to Selene whose ancient eyes had seen threats he couldn't imagine. Send runners to every pack, every territory, everyone we can reach. This isn't just about Thornhaven anymore. If the wolf kingdoms fall separately, we all fall. We make our stand here, together, or we die divided. That night, as preparations for the siege consumed the castle, Selene found Cassius alone on the battlements. You know this is what the shepherd wanted, she said. Force you to gather all the wolves in one place, weaken your defenses, by making you protect refugees. It's a trap. I know, Cassius replied. But if we don't help the other kingdoms, if we let them fall while protecting ourselves, we deserve whatever comes after. My father believed in unity. Maybe that's why they killed him first, because his vision was the biggest threat to their plans. Noble. Possibly suicidal. Selene stood beside him, her presence a comfort in the growing darkness. I've seen kingdoms rise and fall across 200 years. You know what makes the difference? Leaders willing to stand when standing seems impossible. Have you seen anything like this before? These mysterious attacks? Once, she said quietly. About 150 years ago, an organized force appeared in the eastern continent, wiping out supernatural communities systematically. They didn't take territory or resources. They just eliminated anyone with significant power. We never learned who led them or what their ultimate goal was because they disappeared as quickly as they came. I thought they were gone. I hoped they were. But now they're back. Or they never left. Maybe they just moved to new hunting grounds. Selene looked at him. I can leave, Cassius. If I'm here, I become a target too. Ancient conduits are exactly the kind of threat they'd want to eliminate. My presence might make things worse for you. Cassius turned to face her fully. You saved my life, broke a curse everyone said was permanent, and revealed your true nature to protect me. You think I'm going to let you walk away now? I'm functionally immortal. Everyone I've ever cared about dies, usually violently because my presence attracts danger. Is that really what you want? I've spent 10 years cursed, powerless, and alone. I'll take whatever time we have. He reached out, cupping her face with a gentleness that contradicted his warrior's hands. Besides, I'm an alpha king about to face an existential threat, with insufficient resources and no real plan. I'm probably not surviving this anyway. She laughed despite herself. That's possibly the least romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. Give me time. I'll get better at it. He kissed her then, there on the battlements with war approaching and fate uncertain, and felt something like hope kindle in his chest. They were interrupted by shouts from the walls. Guards pointing toward the northern road, where torchlight reflected off thousands of approaching figures. The enemy had arrived early, moving faster than anticipated. Cassius and Selene rushed to the main gates where Captain Rowan was already mobilizing defenses. They're not even trying to hide, Rowan said, pointing at the massive force visible in the torchlight. Just marching straight toward us like they expect us to simply surrender. As the force drew closer, details became visible. They wore matching dark armor with no insignia, moved with military precision, and numbered in the thousands. But something was wrong about them. Their movements were too synchronized, their formations too perfect, their silence too complete. No army moved like that. No human force, no wolf pack, nothing natural. A single figure stepped forward from their ranks, removed their helmet, and revealed a face Cassius recognized with shock. It was Lord Regent Malvo, very much alive, despite Cassius having personally killed him hours earlier. The man smiled up at the walls. "Hello, King Cassius. I believe we have unfinished business." The figure wearing Malvo's face stood before the castle walls, illuminated by torchlight, very much alive despite Cassius having killed him. Beside him, another figure removed her helmet to reveal Morvanna the Veil Weaver, who should have been locked in the dungeons below. Then another figure stepped forward. Alpha, Sebastian of Ironmoor, supposedly dead for 5 years. One by one, supposedly dead leaders appeared from the army's ranks, all wearing the same dark armor, all moving with that same unnatural synchronicity. "This is wrong," Celine whispered, her silver tattoos beginning to glow. "They're not alive. They're not undead like normal necromancy either. There's something else. Puppets. Empty vessels being controlled remotely." Malvo's corpse spoke, but the voice wasn't his. It came from everywhere and nowhere, echoing across the battlefield with unnatural resonance. "King Cassius Nightvane. You've proven remarkably resilient. Most would have died during the initial curse. Others would have succumbed to despair. But you adapted, survived, even thrived in limitation. Impressive." "Who are you?" Cassius demanded, his wolf prowling beneath his skin. "Show yourself, or are you too cowardly to face me directly?" "I am the shepherd," the voice replied through multiple corpse mouths speaking, in perfect unison. "I have guided the supernatural world for 3 centuries, culling the strong, eliminating the dangerous, ensuring balance is maintained. And you, King Cassius, represent a serious imbalance. You murdered my father, you cursed me, you manipulated my brother, all to maintain balance? Your father was building alliances between wolf packs, human kingdoms, and other supernatural races. Left unchecked, that unity would have created something too powerful to control. You were supposed to die, or descend into bitter weakness. Instead, you adapted and became more dangerous than your father ever was. A cursed king who learned to rule without his wolf, then regained that wolf with the help of an ancient conduit? That's the kind of power combination that must be eliminated." The corpse army began moving forward in perfect lockstep. Thousands of reanimated bodies, all former leaders and powerful beings, now serving as the shepherd's weapons. On the walls, Cassius's defenders prepared to meet them, but the numbers were overwhelming. Even with the foreign alphas and their wolves, even with everyone who'd rallied to Thornhaven, they were outnumbered 10 to 1. "I offer you a choice," the shepherd continued. "Surrender yourself and the conduit. Allow me to end your threat to balance permanently. In exchange, I'll spare your kingdom. Your people will live, your brother will be released to rule in your place, and Thornhaven will join the other territories under my guidance. Refuse, and I'll kill everyone in this castle, salt the earth, and ensure your bloodline is erased from history." Cassius looked at the thousands of corpse soldiers, at his insufficient defenses, at the civilians who'd fled to the castle for protection. He'd spent 10 years making impossible choices, balancing duty against desire, responsibility against self-preservation. This was just another impossible choice. Except this time, the cost of failure wasn't his throne, it was genocide. "How long do I have to decide?" he asked. "You have until dawn, that's 4 hours. Use them wisely." The corpse army stopped advancing and simply stood there, thousands of empty vessels waiting for their master's command, patient as death itself. Cassius descended from the walls, calling an emergency council in the throne room. Every alpha, every advisor, every leader who'd come to Thornhaven gathered to debate options that all seemed to lead to destruction. "We fight," Alpha Cormac insisted. "We may be outnumbered, but we're alive. They're corpses, we have advantages." "We don't even know how to kill them permanently," Alpha Thalia countered. Conventional weapons might slow them down, but they'll just keep coming. And every one of us who falls becomes another puppet for the shepherd to use. We could evacuate, suggested Scholar Matthias. Use the secret passages to get the civilians out while we hold the walls. And go where? Captain Rowan shook his head. The shepherd controls forces across the continent. We'd be hunted down individually instead of destroyed together. The debate raged for an hour, voices rising in fear and frustration, until Cassius finally spoke. Enough. I've made my decision. The room fell silent. Celine, who'd been standing quietly in the corner, straightened. Cassius, whatever you're thinking. I'm going to accept the shepherd's terms, he said calmly. I'll surrender myself and ask you to surrender as well. Our lives for the kingdom's survival. Chaos erupted. Multiple voices shouting protest, calling him a fool, a coward, demanding alternatives. But Celine just stared at him with those ancient storm-colored eyes, reading something in his expression that others missed. Slowly, she smiled. You're not planning to actually surrender, are you? Of course not, Cassius replied. But the shepherd needs to think I am. Captain Rowan, how many of our best trackers do we have? 20, maybe 30 good ones. Why? Because the shepherd is controlling these corpses remotely, which means there's a source point, a location where the actual person is hiding while projecting their power. If we can find that source, we can cut the head off this operation. The corpse vessels, Celine said, understanding dawning. They're all leaders who were killed in ways that left their bodies recoverable. That's not coincidental. The shepherd needs intact corpses to puppet, which means somewhere there's a repository where they're being stored and controlled from. Exactly. And if I surrender, if I walk out there and get close to the army, I'll be able to trace the control threads back to their source. I'm an alpha. I can feel pack bonds, magical connections, the threads that tie power to its wielder. The shepherd's control over all these bodies has to leave a trace I can follow. That's suicide, Alpha Cormac protested. You'll be surrounded by thousands of corpse soldiers. Even if you find the source location, how do you get there? Cassius looked at Celine. How fast can a conduit move when she's not pretending to be human? Fast enough, she said quietly. But Cassius, if you're proposing what I think you're proposing, it's incredibly risky. The moment the shepherd realizes you're tracing the control threads, they'll kill you. Then I'll have to work fast. He turned to address the room. Here's what's going to happen. At dawn, I walk out and announce my surrender. Celine comes with me. The shepherd will want to gloat, to explain their grand plan. Villains always do. While they're talking, I'll trace the control source. Once I have the location, Celine gets me there faster than any army can follow. We eliminate the shepherd, the corpses collapse, and Thornhaven survives. And if it doesn't work? Rowan asked. Then you open the third sealed order I gave you days ago, and follow those instructions. But it will work. It has to. The plan was insane. Based on assumptions that might be wrong, and relied on split-second timing with no room for error. Everyone in the room knew it, but they also knew they had no better options. One by one, the gathered leaders nodded acceptance. Cassius spent the remaining hours before dawn making preparations, writing letters to be opened if he didn't return, saying goodbyes to people who'd served him faithfully through impossible years. Finally, he found Celine on the battlements again, watching the corpse army standing motionless in the pre-dawn darkness. Having second thoughts? He asked. I'm 247 years old, she replied. I've had second thoughts about most of those years. But this? Standing with you against an impossible threat? This feels right in a way most things haven't for a very long time. If this goes wrong, it won't. She turned to face him. You broke a decade, old curse through sheer stubbornness. You're not dying to some megalomaniac puppet master. Besides, I've gotten used to having you around. It would be inconvenient to break in a new king. He laughed, despite the circumstances. When this is over, when we've won, let's talk about what comes after. A future conversation. I'll hold you to that. Dawn broke over Thornhaven, painting the sky in shades of gold and red like fire and blood mixing. Cassius and Selene walked through the castle gates alone, leaving his defenders on the walls, walking toward the thousands of corpse soldiers that waited with inhuman patience. The shepherd's voice echoed across the field. A wise choice, King Cassius. Step forward and kneel. Accept your judgment, and your people will be spared. Cassius walked forward, but he didn't kneel. Instead, he stood tall, letting his wolf rise to the surface, flooding his senses with supernatural awareness. And there, faint but unmistakable, he felt them. Thousands of control threads, magical connections running from each corpse vessel back to a single source, point. He followed them with his mind, tracing their path back across miles of distance, through forests and mountains, until he found it. An underground complex in the Ashen Peaks, 40 miles northeast. That's where the shepherd was hiding. He met Selene's eyes and nodded fractionally. She understood immediately. Her silver tattoos blazed to life, and before the shepherd could react, before the corpse army could move, she grabbed Cassius, and they vanished in a burst of light that crossed 40 miles in 3 seconds. They materialized in a cavern deep beneath the Ashen Peaks, a place that reeked of old magic and older death. The walls were covered in the same symbols Morvanna had used, but multiplied thousands of times, creating a web of power that filled the entire space. At the cavern's center stood a figure in black robes, their hands raised above a massive circle where hundreds of corpses lay in neat rows, all connected by glowing threads to the robed figure's fingertips. The shepherd turned as they arrived, and for the first time, Cassius saw his enemy's face. It was ancient, neither male nor female, with features that seemed to shift like water, as if the person wearing it couldn't decide what they were supposed to look like. Clever, the shepherd said, sounding more annoyed than impressed. I underestimated your ability to trace control threads, a mistake I won't repeat. The threads connecting to the distant corpse army suddenly snapped, the magic redirecting. The corpses in the cavern began rising, hundreds of them, all former powerful beings, all under the shepherd's direct control now at close range. They surrounded Cassius and Selene in a tightening circle. You want to know why I do this? The shepherd asked conversationally while their puppets closed in. Because supernatural beings are inherently destabilizing. You breed too fast, fight too much, accumulate too much power. Left unchecked, you'd destroy yourselves and take the world with you. I'm 3,000 years old, King Cassius. I've watched civilizations rise and fall. The only constant is that concentrated power always leads to destruction. So you became the very thing you claimed to prevent, Selene said, her form beginning to shift into that multidimensional state. A single entity with enough power to control thousands of corpses, manipulating entire kingdoms, deciding who lives and dies based on your judgment. You're not maintaining balance. You're hoarding all the power for yourself. I'm ensuring survival, the shepherd corrected. The world needs a guide, someone willing to make the hard choices. The world needs to be free, Cassius growled, his wolf surging forward. He shifted, but unlike before, the transformation felt different, stronger. As if breaking the curse hadn't just restored his wolf but enhanced it. He'd grown in power during his decade of limitation, and now that growth combined with his wolf created something unprecedented. The corpse soldiers attacked simultaneously. Cassius met them with savage fury, tearing through animated flesh, but for everyone he destroyed, 2 more took its place. They were endless, tireless, feeling no pain or fear. Selene fought beside him, her conduit powers allowing her to disrupt the control threads directly, but even her ancient magic couldn't sever them all fast enough. You can't win, the shepherd said calmly, not even breathing hard, despite maintaining control over hundreds of puppets. I have 3,000 years of accumulated power. You have what? 30 years of life experience and a conduit who's barely learned what she's capable of? Cassius, bleeding from a dozen wounds, looked at Selene, who was growing visibly tired from the effort of disrupting so many control threads. They were losing. The shepherd was right. Individually, they couldn't match someone who'd spent millennia accumulating power and perfecting these techniques. But individually wasn't the only option. Selene, he called out. You said conduits are bridges. Connections between power sources. Can you bridge me to you? Understanding flashed in her eyes. Yes, but Cassius, you don't know what you're asking. My true form, the full extent of what I am, it's not meant to merge with a single being. It could destroy you, or it could make us strong enough to win. Trust me like I trusted you. He fought his way to her side, pressing his back against hers while corpses surrounded them on all sides. Together? Remember? She hesitated only a moment before making her choice. Her silver tattoos exploded with light, becoming liquid streams that flowed over Cassius's skin, merging with him, connecting their essences in ways that shouldn't be possible. His wolf and her conduit nature intertwined, creating something new. He felt her 200 years of experience flooding into him, felt power that had been waiting for someone worthy to channel it. And she felt his wolf, his alpha, authority, his unbreakable will that had survived a decade of cursed imprisonment. The transformation was agony and ecstasy simultaneously. Cassius's form shifted, but not into his normal wolf. This was something else entirely. He grew larger, his black fur becoming threaded with silver light, his eyes burning with both gold and white fire. Celine's form merged partially with his, her consciousness joining his in a unity that went beyond any mate bond, beyond any magic either had experienced. They became a single being, a wolf conduit hybrid that radiated power unlike anything the cavern had witnessed. The shepherd stopped smiling. That's not possible. Wolves and conduits are incompatible. The energies should reject each other. We're not rejecting, Cassius and Celine's voices spoke in harmony. We're balancing. You've spent 3,000 years convinced that concentrated power in your hands was the only solution. You forgot that true strength comes from connection, not control. They attacked as one. The merged form moved with wolf speed and conduit power, tearing through the corpse army while simultaneously severing every control thread with a touch. The shepherd tried to re-establish connections, but Cassius Celine disrupted them faster than they could be reformed. Every puppet that fell stayed down. Within minutes, hundreds of corpses lay truly dead, their threads severed permanently. The shepherd retreated, pulling power from deeper reserves, their form growing more solid and defined, revealing what they truly were beneath the shape-shifting exterior, a lich, an ancient mage, who'd traded their humanity for immortality millennia ago. They raised hands crackling with necromantic energy. Fine. If I can't control you, I'll simply destroy you and raise you as my most powerful puppet yet. The attack was devastating, raw death magic that could unmake living tissue on contact. But Cassius Celine didn't dodge. Instead, they channeled it. Celine's conduit nature absorbed the death magic, transformed it through their merged essence, and redirected it back as pure life energy. The lich screamed as their own power, inverted and purified, struck them. 3,000 years of accumulated darkness began burning away. The lich's form cracked, light pouring through the fissures, as the very immortality they'd crafted began unraveling. No, I was maintaining balance. I was protecting the world. You were controlling it, Cassius, Celine said, their merged voice gentle now. And that's not the same thing. The lich collapsed, their ancient body finally experiencing the death they'd avoided for millennia. The symbols on the walls flickered and died. Every control thread severed simultaneously. Across the continent, in multiple kingdoms, thousands of corpse soldiers collapsed into truly dead flesh. The shepherd's 3,000-year reign ended in a cavern beneath the ashen peaks, undone by two beings who chose unity over isolation. Cassius and Celine separated slowly, the merged form dissolving back into their individual selves. They collapsed against each other, exhausted but alive. That was... Cassius struggled for words. Unprecedented. Celine finished. Theoretically impossible, and definitely something we should never mention to anyone who might want to study it. Agreed. He pulled her close, feeling the mate bond between them stronger than ever after their merger. Ready to go home and deal with the aftermath of saving the world? Home, she repeated, testing the word. I haven't had one of those in 200 years. Well, you do now. Assuming you want to stay with a cursed Alpha King who's probably going to face a dozen new crises before the week is out. She laughed, kissing him softly. I think I can manage that. 3 months after the shepherd's defeat, Thornhaven Castle had become something it had never been before, a true meeting place for supernatural races. The throne room hosted delegations from wolf packs, human kingdoms, witch covens, and even a few vampires who'd emerged from hiding now that the shepherd's control was gone. Cassius stood before them all, no longer just king of Thornhaven, but recognized as the leader who'd unified forces to face an existential threat. The political aftermath had been complex. Darius faced trial and was ultimately sentenced to exile rather than execution. Cassius had enough blood on his hands without adding his brothers. Morvanna and the other conspirators received varying punishments based on their level of involvement. The revelation that the shepherd had been manipulating supernatural politics for millennia sent shockwaves through every kingdom, forcing leaders to re-examine alliances and enmities that might have been artificially created. But the biggest change was personal. Cassius stood on the balcony of his private chambers, watching sunset paint the mountains gold, and felt Celine's arms wrap around him from behind. The council wants to create a formal alliance between all supernatural races, she said. They're calling it the Unity Accord. Very creative. Let me guess, they want me to lead it. You did save everyone. Multiple times. It's almost like you earned it. He turned to face her, still marveling that she was real. That she'd chosen to stay, despite being able to live anywhere across her functionally immortal lifespan. What about you? 200 years of staying hidden, never forming attachments. Are you sure you want to be this visible, this connected? I'm terrified, she admitted honestly. Every instinct tells me to run before I watch you die of old age or get killed in another impossible situation. But you know what's scarier? Spending another 200 years alone, convincing myself that isolation is safety. I'd rather have decades with you than centuries alone. Just decades? I plan to be annoyingly long-lived out of pure stubbornness. She laughed, and it was a sound he'd grown addicted to. They'd discovered in the months since merging that their bond had side effects. Cassius aged slower now, his lifespan extended by residual conduit energy. Not immortal, but no longer bound by normal wolf limits. It was as if their unity had balanced both of them, meeting somewhere in the middle. A knock at the door interrupted them. Captain Rowan entered, looking apologetic. Sire, there's a situation in the Eastern Territories. Reports of a new type of magical anomaly. The council thinks it might be remnants of the shepherd's work that need addressing. Cassius exchanged a glance with Celine. When do they need me there? Tomorrow morning. I've already prepared your escort. After Rowan left, Celine sighed. 3 months of peace was nice while it lasted. We knew it couldn't last forever. The shepherd might be gone, but they left a legacy of chaos across the continent. It'll take years to clean up. He pulled her close. Good thing I have a 200-year-old conduit to help me figure it out. Former 200-year-old loner, she corrected. Current partner to an annoyingly noble alpha king who keeps volunteering for impossible tasks. Would you have me any other way? Absolutely not. The next morning, they left for the Eastern Territories together. Not as king and subject. Not as alpha and helper, but as partners in the truest sense. Word of their bond had spread across the continent, becoming something of a legend. The cursed king and the ancient conduit who'd merged their powers to defeat an immortal evil. Storytellers already sang songs about it in taverns. But for Cassius, the real story wasn't the dramatic battles or the merged form, or even breaking his decade-long curse. The real story was simpler. He'd learned that true strength came not from power hoarded or isolation maintained, but from connections forged and trust given. His father had understood that before the shepherd killed him. It had taken Cassius 10 cursed years to learn the same lesson. As they rode toward their next challenge, Selim beside him and his kingdom united behind him, Cassius reflected on the journey from broken, powerless king to unified leader of a new supernatural order. He'd spent a decade unable to shift, trapped in human form while his wolf slept in chains. A single touch from a mysterious woman had begun breaking those chains. But the real transformation hadn't been regaining his wolf. It had been learning that vulnerability wasn't weakness, that asking for help wasn't failure, that the strongest bonds were built on trust rather than dominance. Sometimes we spend so long cursed that we forget our true nature isn't meant to be hidden or suppressed. It's meant to be shared and celebrated with those who see us for who we really are. The Alpha King had learned that lesson through suffering, through patience, through a conduit who'd waited 200 years to find someone worth staying for. And in the transformed reality they'd created together, that was enough.